Hey guys, it's Kyle Christensen here, Chief Revenue and Marketing Officer over at the one and only Splash Inc. And I'm ready to go one-on-one with ADC Partners.
Hey, this is Dave Almy of ADC Partners, and appreciate you checking out this latest episode of the One-on-One Sports Business Conversations podcast. A reminder that past episodes are over at adcpartners.com/podcast, and if you like what you hear, please go ahead and leave a rating or review. It's always greatly appreciated. Now, there's been so much change so quickly in sports business that there's a bunch of stuff that seems normal now that I wouldn't even believe possible even just 10 years ago, right? We're paying college athletes, you're watching games on your phone. Heck, there's even a pro team in Las Vegas, multiple pro teams in Las Vegas. And then there's online gaming. It's a market that's currently estimated at about $10 billion a year, and it's projected to grow by 12% annually through the end of the decade. That kind of growth is what puts a gleam in the eye of this episode's guest, Kyle Christensen, the Chief Revenue and Chief Marketing Officer of Splash Inc. With a rapidly growing user base that recently surpassed 2 million, Splash is turning heads in the online gaming industry with a social approach to their contests. It's a strategy that falls right into the wheelhouse for Christensen, a veteran of the entertainment and social media industries. In our conversation, we talk about how his experience at companies like Warner Brothers, Meta, and Netflix prepared him for taking the reins at Splash. We also go into how Splash is differentiating themselves from the industry's biggest players, what draws him to companies that like to throw bricks through the windows of the status quo, and why maybe breaking down that firewall between personal and business isn't such a bad idea. Oh, and if you've ever wondered what it's like to incur the wrath of hardcore comic book fans, well, he'll let you know what that's like too. And just a heads up, there's some explicit language in this episode. So thanks again for listening, and hope you enjoy my chat with Kyle Christensen, the CRO and CMO of Splash Inc. All right, look, Kyle, your career began on the entertainment side of sports and entertainment, right? You managed social media for Fox Sports, and then later for Warner Brothers and Netflix, right? So did you think that entertainment and movies were your future, or did you always have sort of a broader perspective? Like, how did you come at that particular equation?
It's funny, I think about this quite a bit as the evolution of my career has sort of progressed. And, I was a marketing major, minor international business, but probably more of a college baseball player than anything else. And I'll never forget it. When I was a little kid, we'd come back from church on Christmas Eves, and I finally just, got over the slog that was an hour and a half of, being a restless, I'd say still young adult, and coming home and
It's all
watching.
in the mind sometimes.
It is. It's probably still me, to be honest. But I'd come back and I'd watch the Sports Center year in review recap, and I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And so once the college career was done, luckily enough, I got a job at Fox Sports right out of college.
Right out of the
And
gate.
so right out of the gate, packed my bags, moved to LA, and I was working for Fox Sports doing their nationally syndicated show, and then NFL on Fox and College Football Saturday, all of those cool things. Back in late 2000s, early 2010s, and I was writing shot sheets, cutting highlights, and doing all of that stuff. And this was right around when Facebook and Twitter were taking off. And so I went to our production manager and I was like, "Hey, we should be putting these on Facebook." And he was like, "I don't know anything about that.
What are you,
Go ahead."
insane?
Yeah, I was like, "Sure, whatever, kid." And so I started putting all these highlights, daily highlights on there. And we went from about 3,000 to 300,000 users over the course of football season. And finally, the
Wow.
execs were like, "Well, holy shit, we're onto something here."
There's
And we
something
started
here.
selling, yeah, we started selling ads against it before the Facebook platform was selling ads. We put them in our interstitials as part of, the highlight packages, and we charged Burger King, whatever amount of money. I wasn't in the room then. And I just it started to click there. And then, went over to Warner Brothers, and this was, I'm a sci-fi nerd at heart too. So working on Harry Potter, The Dark Knight, The Hobbit, some of these
Oh my God.
really kind of things
Yeah.
that had captured my attention back in the day. I'm now,
All right, this is nerd heaven right now. This podcast is going to have to get refiled under a certain category, like like
Seriously.
nerd destinations or something like that. Yeah, I totally understand. So yeah, you're in the midst of it there.
In the midst of it, and this is about when YouTube started taking off as a marketing channel, and I was part of the digital team where the media side of the house was really being involved in our social spend. So much so that we had worked with Legendary at the time, the production company, to try and figure out some sort of formula or algorithm. Like if we saw a trailer that got X amount of views at a
Right.
certain point, we could essentially say how it was going to perform at the box office. And I'll never forget too. I think it was Wrath of the Titans, the follow up to Clash of the Titans. We put out a trailer and it didn't do so well, and we had to invest a lot of money as a studio. And a couple 20 somethings were like, guys, I don't know if the movie's going to do that great based off of what we saw, but we were able to work with Google and YouTube to say like these parts really popped in the trailer and these parts were kind of duds. And so much so that we got it all the way up to the top and the president of the studio and went back and did reshoots. And that's again where like another kind of notch clip where I basically was thinking, wow, I can impact the business by the cool marketing stuff that we did.
But it's kind of interesting too because it feels like this happened very organically for you, right? This was something like, oh, okay, I'm kind of interested in this. We should just try this out. You didn't approach it from the standpoint of, I'm going to change the business with this approach. Was that does that accurate? I mean, do you feel like that's the way it kind of unfolded for you?
I think that's the way it started. But by the way, you feel really empowered when you call out some sort of like statistical trend that ultimately does impact a movie and therefore the business.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, wow, I can really put on a lens outside of a digital marketer and really kind of a business sort of entrepreneur of these sort of marks within the studio, to help ultimately drive larger impact.
And you're probably looking at the first time where you could approach an executive with data and analytics to back up what was the gut. So much of that was always like, well, this feels right and this seems right. But now you've actually got, hey, this is what information is telling us. And that was pretty unique when you were doing this at that time.
100%, especially at a studio like Warner Brothers. Not to say that they're antiquated compared to my next stop at Netflix, but I go to Netflix and it's literally driven by data
Supercharged.
so much. Yeah, and having the ability to kind of land the importance of that with traditional studios, to the sense that we started, with, I would probably say, small 8-figure budgets as a marketing group to larger 9 figures, approaching $1 billion worth of marketing budget, because
Mm.
we've shown that the data that drives material impact on top of the titles itself. It's just really cool and empowering, and you kind of come at it from a very creative sort of scrappy lens, and then by the time you leave and come out of it, you feel very validated, but also a sense of responsibility on top of it.
You left Netflix, you went and joined Facebook for a while. So you went from the content side to the content supplier side to Facebook, managing their marketing. And after that, you went to PointsBet, right, in 2021, which kind of seems like a needle scratch across the record a little bit. What drew you to online gaming? How did that whole part of your career get started? What was so compelling about both the market and PointsBet specifically that drew you there?
Yeah, I'd say it's two parts. I would argue that it actually wasn't a huge departure from,
Hmm.
Netflix. I had a stop at Disney and National Geographic as well, then to Meta. But, Netflix, we were trying to entertain the world, right? That
Yeah,
is basically their vision as a whole. And whether it was launching the films division or launching globally, I was part of that team. You really wanted to just entertain people, and
yeah,
you thought of the best ways to get that in front of it. Same with my time in Nat Geo. We sort of transformed from a analog business of magazines and trips and all of these things into a digitally native business, which was just really cool to do. And the same thing at Meta. Again, Meta is so product and engineering led, and frankly, I was really lucky to spend time understanding like the social graph and network effects. But at
getting
the end of the
your
day,
hands dirty in there.
oh, it's so cool. And
Yeah,
frankly, we'll get into it a little bit later, but that's exactly what we're trying to replicate with Splash. But at the end of the day, we're still trying to entertain people, whether it was
yeah.
through Facebook Watch and launching the video platform, or Facebook Groups, which was our main product feature in our brand marketing. There's entertainment in there. There's help. There's sort of people coming in because they have questions or concerns, and there's other people that are there to, have a solution to the problem they're trying to solve. And so that was all part of the entertainment. And again, I mentioned a little bit at the beginning, but I played sports all the way through college. Big sports junkie. Go Broncos, go Nuggets. And so, it,
The editorializing. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Keep on point here, Christensen.
yeah, yeah. Sorry, it's a big game tonight. So, but yeah, it wasn't a huge departure, and I go to Vegas. I'll throw down a couple bucks on it, and it
So you
makes the
had
game
some
more.
personal background and experience with gaming, sort of knew the landscape a little bit.
100%. And,
Yeah.
PointsBet was a challenger brand at the time. DraftKings and FanDuel had really established themselves. The Caesars and the Bet MGMs were spending, close to $1 billion in marketing. So we had to get super creative. So I loved thinking through the challenge of what they were ultimately going to face. And then, frankly, selfishly, a little ego driven. It was my first opportunity at a C-suite role,
Okay. Yeah.
in taking on that role and responsibility, not only building out an effective marketing strategy and plan, but reporting directly to CEO, being part of a publicly traded company, answering to the board. Those were things that ultimately I wanted to continue to add to my repertoire, if you will. And so, those two factors put together, it was an easy jump.
It feels like also, and you just brought it up, but I want to key in on this because I think this is important, right? You charted this path that goes entertainment, then sort of technology, social media, then to online gaming, and it kind of looks on the surface kind of like, well, that's kind of an interesting, curvy path. But in reality, there's kind of a thread that runs through all of those that you just alluded to, right? This is about entertainment. This is about collecting people into things that are important to them, whether you're talking about the nerdalicious IP of Lord of the Rings, or you're talking about something as specific as gaming and online gaming. It does kind of have this convergence in that sense. Are those the similarities that you think about when you talk about those specific industries? Are those the ones that resonate? I guess also, where do they diverge? What did you have to learn when you got deep into online gaming that was different from what you'd seen?
Yeah, I'll start with the latter question
Hmm.
first. You have to understand and learn the industry, especially, like I said, as a challenger brand. You have to know why FanDuel and DraftKings are so successful.
Hmm.
And frankly, you had to try not to emulate that because they were playing a game, a war of attrition, if you will, right?
Yeah.
This is
Last
when the
person
free bets.
standing.
Yep, this is when the free bets were rolling through. This is when deposit matches were, insane. And as a challenger brand, you can't do that. But that's now they've created such, I call it a bad consumer behavior, because the expectation is like, hey, if
Yeah.
I deposit money, I better get matched to that, or why
Right.
the hell would
Why
I
would I sign up for an
actually
account
do
if
it?
I'm not getting $500?
Exactly. And so, as much as I thought our product was far superior, people don't give a shit. They want their free money so that they can run some
I
parlays,
like
right?
money.
Yeah, exactly. And so you really had to understand the nuance. And then, just again, like, not to skip ahead, but that's exactly what we're trying to solve at
Yeah.
Splash Sports. Because at the end of it, I think, not only entertainment, but it's really a community based driven. Think about it. Whether you're, playing sports, whether you're part of like a Harry Potter fan club, whether you're in a Facebook group, whether you're playing with friends in pools and, peer to peer contests and stuff like that. I steal the Chris Dixon phrase of like, come for the tool, stay for the network. We really believe come for the competition, stay for the community. We have
Yeah.
pools and we have games across our three suites, and sites: Run Your Pool, Office Football Pool, and Splash Sports. People start with 30 people. 5 years later, it's 3,500 people. You know what I mean? And like, there's just a real camaraderie. One of our co-founders, Joel Milton, he always talks about the only time he ever talks to his Colgate buddies, about 30 of them, is come August, when it's time to restart their pool
Time to draft.
and time to draft and do all those things. Like, that's actually at the core of what we want to do. And so I like to think I've taken a little part from each one of my stops. And this is sort of the culmination in what we're building with Splash Sports.
So let's do that. Let's dive into this. Is a terrible analogy. I'm almost embarrassed I just said this, but we're going to dive into Splash just a little bit. It's terrible. I apologize. Maybe that'll get edited out. Let's do a high level overview of the company and how it's both similar to the ones that you just referenced, like how it's similar to the FanDuels and the DraftKings and the PointsBet, but where it really diverges from them, because I think that's the interesting story here and what's being brought to the table. So, how about a quick overview of the company, and then we'll get into what makes it distinct from the others.
Perfect. Yeah. So at its highest level, Splash Inc. is our parent company. So the
Mm-hmm.
same way Alphabet for Google and YouTube, or Meta for Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook. Splash Inc. is the parent company because below that we have three sister companies. One is runyourpool.com, the other is officefootballpool.com. Those are both entertainment only, free to play, available in 48 states, sans Nevada and Washington because of, you know, things we don't really need to get into. And then we have our
It's a whole
third,
separate podcast.
it is a whole separate one. And our third, which is Splash Sports. So Splash Sports is our real money gaming platform. It's peer to peer, it's game of skill. But we handle a lot of the, or all of the sort of payments and payouts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that we hear from commissioners across the board, it's just, when you reach that scale, it's really hard to do a lot of the administrative stuff. We take that all off of their plate. And these people are just playing for real money across the board. You just need a commissioner to sort of set up the contest and set up the invites. But that's also where we differentiate. And again, like, I take little nuggets from my time at Facebook and Meta, just that we actually reward our commissioners. So we give
Mm-hmm.
them a $10 new user bonus for every new user that they bring in. We give them
Okay.
$10. And then we do a rev share on top of that. And we are starting to work with sponsorships and partnerships. And so let's say, David, you have a contest with 5,000 people in it at $100 a pop. Like, that's a pretty significant pot that people are going to try and win. Somebody who wants to get in front of that, player of that game of skill, we work with them and then do a rev share on the back end with the commissioner as well. So we've already seen a few different commissioners earn high, five figures as far as their rewards and incentives.
I'm making quick notes here on revenue potential.
Well, I mean, don't quit your day job, but we've seen a
This
lot of it.
podcast reaches people in the hundreds, Kyle.
But we have a couple really great partners. For example, one of our best partners is Rick Rungood, and I would argue he's an influencer. He's a creator in the golf space.
Yep.
He talks about each contest. The RBC last week. He's breaking down why he thinks Scotty's going to go back to back, and he really breaks down the content so much in the golf world that people love. And at the very end of it, super organically, he says, "Hey, I'm going to run a contest. It's a golf tiers contest on Splash Sports, $20 to enter or whatever it is. Anybody who wants to play with and against me, feel free to sign up. Link in bio." And it's not just sort of some peddling to try and get an affiliate deal on the back end, which, by the way, goes back to what a lot of the industry incumbents are doing. We're just actively trying to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah.
So much so that I would say, on the surface, somebody who doesn't know the gaming industry might think that, we're one and the same or cousins. But a lot of what we offer in our game of skills, they don't have a lot of products around it as well. But also, I just don't think they want to be in that space. The margins aren't great for them there. That's why they're focused on live betting, same game parlays, pick'ems, because those margins reach 20 to 30%.
And you also then take into account the network effect, right? You're giving people a reason to, use this podcast as an example, right? I could set up a game and start reaching out to people and say, hey, we're going to do the game over the next 6 episodes, be a part of that. And all of a sudden your reach expands dramatically. You start to acquire new users, which kind of brings us to the next question I have for you. It's called a segue in the business. There's a lot of change coming to digital marketing. I think it's been in the press, so much, right? It's, the elimination of cookies, first party data. And you really see Splash as the location for where those marketing dollars can go. Like you wrote, I think it was in the SBJ, you said, gaming brings people together as a community. The literal and figurative social connections of gamers have the power to create a network effect of acquisition and growth. So there's a real fundamental piece for you. As you reach out to advertisers and brand marketers with that message, how are they responding to it? What are you learning about, how they see this particular community that you're growing?
Listen, they definitely see it as an opportunity. And rightfully so, they are the brand stewards of brands that have been around anywhere from 20 to 100 years. So
Yeah.
need to tread lightly. That's why the beauty of Run Your Pool and Office Football Pool, it's free to play. Anybody can play, is really beneficial.
Hmm.
That said, these brands show up in the biggest sporting events, and those sporting events are only getting larger and more costly, right? And we do it at a fraction of the cost. And I would
Right.
argue that, because we give our partners the first party data on the back end, people, when they enter in a contest, they check a box, say, one of our partners, Jack Links, who's sponsored March Madness and NFL contests, they've got over 100,000 emails that have gone to them that they can retarget and remarket. But you know, aside from retargeting and remarketing a product, just think about how much brand sort of credibility you bring when you're just doing some really fun shit, right? Like you're giving away a couple $1,000, a trip to the Super Bowl, and some free beef jerky. Why wouldn't I sign up? I'm going to play this
God, my,
game
my
already.
stomach literally just grumbled.
It's the same thing. We partnered with TaylorMade around the Masters, and they were launching their Stealth 2 driver last year. Put the pricing centered around like an awesome club that people want to go in and buy. You're immediately qualified because you know that these people want that product. Oh, by the way, they're going to watch the Masters anyways, so I'm going to pick Scotty Scheffler again, and I probably have a chance to win that. And even if I don't, we got about 35,000 people to sign up for that. 34,997 people are not going to win those prizes. But you follow up and say, hey, David, thanks for playing. Sorry you didn't win. Here's 20% off a driver, and we'll give you free shipping. That might convince you to come over the line.
It's, I think, the biggest distinction between brands who would get involved in marketing in sports and adjacent sports, things like Splash, that separates them from the effective from the waste of money, which is this is not just a banner ad. This is not just a sign in a stadium. This is your opportunity to connect with an audience and speak a language that they are familiar with and show that you understand who they are. And you're able to do that because you're doing adjacent to major events, like you just mentioned, Final Four, at a fraction of the cost of what it would try to be to hang that proverbial sign inside the arena and things like that.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, we are looking for partners who actively want to get in and really engage with our audience.
Yeah.
We have over 2 million players on our platform. We have over 16 million users that come to visit the site, to read the blog, to see our pick data, to make picks. And yeah, like you said, we're at a fraction of the cost. And that's not to deter people away from, spending and doing a great commercial in the Final Four. We are complementary, we are ancillary to what they're doing. So not only are they having a beautiful spot built around like their core product, but then they're following up and saying, hey, David, would you like to win this product? Enter into our contest that we already know you're watching, for a chance to play. And then keep doing that, by the way.
Yeah.
There's no reason you can't go from March Madness to the Masters to, the Euro Cup this summer into football season next year. And it's just like a really fun way to engage and get people going. There's 60 million people
Yeah,
that play
why
in
would
these
you
games.
why would you shut that down? It's not like a Final Four fan doesn't go over and watch the Masters the next day. It gives you that opportunity to just
100%.
start letting it swing from one thing to the next. You did have a fairly poignant piece that you wrote on LinkedIn the other day when you talked about having your heart broken by a non-renewing partner. And I had to make sure I had to read down. I was like, oh, is this relationship trouble? But it is relationship trouble, right? And it's when it's not your business, it's one thing, right? When you're working for Meta and a partner doesn't renew, it's like, okay, moving on to the next one. They didn't get it or whatever. But when you're trying to grow a new business and you're trying to cement that reputation, it's quite another, right? So, can you talk about your learnings from that moment and keeping the firewall between personal and business? How does that impact you?
Yeah, I would argue that sometimes, especially in the stage that we're at, you might not need that firewall. Actually, you might want to break it down
Mm,
and have a little bit of skin in the game, right? Because that's exactly it. We are a Series A company. The market isn't great in the venture world. Money is not flowing out from the VCs. To we were lucky enough, and shout out to our co-founders for really getting it over the line to steal our Series A. But we're on a path to profitability now. We really want to control and own our own destiny. And we don't want to make sure that we have to rely on other people to continue to operate. And we think we have a clear path to doing that. But part of it is getting brands on board and feeling comfortable with running these games and sponsoring it with us. And, frankly, being engaged. We do want a partner who's really leaned in and can see, imagine you're a streaming app and you have some of these games coming up for the NFL season. And it's like, what better way than to sponsor an NFL contest? And then you get a weekly email for pick reminders. And it's like, hey, you want to tune in? I'm a Broncos fan again. So it'd be like Broncos Chiefs, don't forget to tune in, click here to sign. You know what I mean? Like, it's just very seamless. And so that's just kind of how we do it. And, listen, again, Series A company, I got equity in the company. I want to win. I want to have a really nice outcome, whether it's, we scale super high or something else. And you do put a lot of time and effort into it. And when you get so close, sometimes it is heartbreaking, but I'll channel my inner Kobe or Michael Jordan. And it's like, it's actually the losses that motivate you to continue to do better versus, again, I'm not bashing on Meta or anything, but if we didn't do well or didn't perform on some of those things, of course you had to answer, but it didn't
at the
really
end of
have
the
a
day,
material impact on the company. Right. Whereas, you lose a deal and the LinkedIn post you're referencing it was an absolutely right decision for the brand not to do it. Doesn't mean it still hurts and doesn't mean I need to think through like, how could we make this so good that the next senior marketing executive goes back to their leadership and is like, guys, we have to do this, or it could jeopardize our performance as a business. So that's kind of what I was channeling. And, again, you go for an angry run. I got a nice heavy bag in the garage, and before you know it, you're back to normal.
In fact, sort of leveled back out. But it's kind of interesting, right? You have worked for a number of companies that are kind of the brick through the glass window a little bit that challenge the status quo. And we've talked about Meta. We've talked about Netflix. We've talked about PointsBet. What draws you to them? I mean, some people seek stability in their lives. You clearly are like, okay, well, let's go see what, where can I go make a mess next? What's that motivation for you?
I mean, my wife is probably thanking you, somewhere around here.
Mrs.
You
Christensen,
know,
I did just ask the question.
I'd probably say it's some sort of innate personality trait that, I do love the challenge. I
Yeah.
do love sort of being the underdog and trying to prove people wrong. And most of it probably myself. Also, though, like that's where the biggest opportunities lie. That's
Yeah.
where the biggest margins are. And, if you, again, you can do it right and you can build it yourself, that has a material change on not only your sort of like outsized understanding of the industry, of your sort of vision of yourself. There's a lot of like tangible and intangible things that I take away from each one of these experiences that I've just been lucky enough to be a part of. And by the way, you look back and connect the dots there, you're like, wow, that's pretty special. And I feel more confident as I go into more unknown territory because I've taken those risks ultimately. And whether they paid off or not, sort of isn't the answer, right? It's just how do you move on to the next thing that life throws at you.
Yeah. And so as you think about those experiences that you've been able to bring to the table for Splash Inc., and you think about some of the early wins and challenges associated with your time there, where do you feel like, okay, we're going to step on the gas here, but let's maybe tap the brake a little bit over there? How is this unfolding for you right now?
Again, shout out to the co-founders for sort of having the vision to go out and run your pool and office football pool. You already sort of have a user base that ultimately we believe will come over to Splash if they're interested in playing for real money, because the platform just complements everything that they really enjoy and takes everything that they hate off of their plate. So that's one side of the house, and that channel has been working extremely well, so much so that each user that comes over and wants to play for real money, they're essentially profitable from day one.
Yeah.
But to your question around what's next, what do we really want to lean into? It is that creator economy. It is that influencer economy for people who are sports specific and sports, adjacent, and their audience wants to engage, interact with them, and potentially playing games for real money. I mentioned Rick Rungood. We have another amazing partner in Kelly in Vegas who has run a few contests for us. Not only are those users coming in, they're highly engaged, but Rick and Kelly are getting a nice check on the back end through our rewards and incentives. And it really starts, as you mentioned earlier, create that network effect. And then ultimately, this is such a sort of sticky product in that we have really high retention rates, and in fact the inverse of what sports betting is,
Mm.
because people are playing with their buddies, and then you have a really good time. You go tell another buddy, hey, I just played in David's Survivor contest, you got to come in. It's like everybody's talking shit. Half of them are lousy, so they're out by week 2, and you have a real chance to win some money from there.
We'll
It's
clear the chumps out quickly.
exactly, it is game theory. It's a game of skill. Like and frankly, I've fallen victim to this, but people know it's like, oh, the Broncos are playing the Raiders in Survivor. I should really take the Bills over the Jets, but I think the Broncos can squeak it out X, Y, and Z, and I end up losing. So you essentially pick against me. That's just where the fun is, and ultimately going back to the entertainment of it all. This is just it's a lot of fun to really engage in competition with your friends, your community, and that's at the crux of our business.
No, it makes a ton of sense. If you look at some of the other players in this particular market, it's surrounded by more or less strangers, which does not give you that stickiness, right? It's harder to break away from something if you're bringing people in and say, hey, I'm going to leave this thing I just turned everybody on to. It just doesn't work the same way.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I call it single player experience, where you are on an app, you're staring at a black mirror, and you're deciding, do you want to take this risk that a trader and an algorithm have put together? You think that you can ultimately beat, which FYI, the house does eventually always win,
It's a big secret
versus
getting revealed here, by the way, people.
but by the way, it's just a lot better to play against your friends. And, you know, I'm not saying that this is the absolute solve for, gaming issues and things that are popping up, in sports, whether it's Shohei or within the NBA. But we do think there is a little bit of sort of self-policing and peer-to-peer.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
just a lot more sort of levers that you can pull that ultimately make it a net sum positive experience. Even if you lose, you're still having a good time. There is somebody who's always going to win. It's not just money floating away into the ether to the big bad corporate. There's just, in our opinion, a lot more benefits of people coming together and competing, whether it's for free or for real money.
Kyle Christensen, he is the Chief Revenue Officer and Chief Marketing Officer for Splash Inc. Thanks very much for spending the time. But before I let you go and go on to, conquer the world in online gaming, I got to put you through the lightning round.
Let's go.
So you seem ready, but clearly you've never listened to past lightning rounds. These can be pretty intense. So we're gonna jump right into it. Are you ready?
Ready.
Here we go. Okay, one of the first movies you ever worked on the marketing capacity was Green Lantern, a sort of infamous movie with Ryan Reynolds, and I believe I read that it featured an error in the Green Lantern oath that was read. I'm wondering what it's like to incur the wrath of a comic book fan.
Oh, it is an absolute nightmare. And I thought you were going to put me on the spot to recite the oath, which I would have butchered again. So I'm going to pass on the oath part, but I will
I
tell
had it
you.
written down here. I was going to have you read the oath, but see, I feel like we've come so far in this last half an hour that I'm going to let it slide.
I appreciate that, but I will say there is nothing quite like a rabid sort of sci-fi fantasy comic book audience. They will never let you forget. So, and then funny story is basically that scared me so much, straight, if you will, that when I started working on the Harry Potter and the Batman
Oh.
movies, we hired a research company to make sure I didn't F it up again.
Oh my God. We got to hire a research company to make sure we're getting these fictional worlds all straight. As you've mentioned incessantly over the course of our time together, you're a big Broncos fan. Will Russell Wilson ever be on one of your fantasy teams?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, okay, that was a fairly easy one. You played baseball for the Metropolitan State University of Denver. Go Roadrunners, by the way. What is the name of the team's mascot?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, it's Rowdy the Roadrunner.
Rowdy. I would have never guessed that.
Okay,
I thought I knew. Yeah.
Follow question. Can a Roadrunner actually be rowdy?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So, no doubt there. Lastly, we're recording this on my anniversary. What did you get me?
It's in the mail. I
Yeah,
can't
okay.
tell you, but
Yeah, it's exciting.
it has
Now.
a whale on it. You want to go full circle on this. The reason we
Let's do it.
call the real money gaming platform /sports is paying a homage to our roots, which is run your pool and office football pool. What do you do when you jump into a pool? You make a splash. So boom.
Look at that. There it goes. Kyle Christensen, thanks very much for spending the time, man.
Thanks, David.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the One-on-One Sports Business Conversations podcast. If you enjoyed it, we always appreciate a subscribe, share, comment, or like. And don't forget, you can always find past episodes at abcpartners.com/podcast. This podcast is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Dave Almy. And the theme music was composed by Scott Holmes.